In this Podslice summary of the All In podcast, hosts Jason, Chamath, Sachs, and Friedberg explore a range of topics. They first dive into an offbeat conversation revolving around their recent health checkups, specifically colonoscopies, which they humorously discuss with an emphasis on the necessity of preventive care as they age. Transitioning into a more serious tone, the crew then discuss a recent occurrence in the American political arena, specifically the ousting of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. The hosts make careful note that the media's portrayal of the far-right Republicans who led this move as intense, budget-conscious individuals might be misrepresenting the situation. The hosts emphasize that the key bone of contention was perceived inconsistencies between McCarthy's private conversations with Republicans and his negotiations with the Biden administration, especially on matters of spending and the Ukraine issue. The hosts critique McCarthy's stance on these issues, labeling his views as out of sync with the majority Republican caucus, arguing this contributed significantly to his ousting. They also delve into detailed discussions on how government spending should ideally work according to law, and how the current situation significantly deviates from this ideal, particularly on the reliance of the so-called continuing resolutions, CRs. CRs, they explain, are emergency measures to extend funding deadlines which have sadly become normalized. The overuse of CRs is criticized for contributing to uncontrolled spending, mismanagement, and ballooning of the national debt as they circumvent the necessary negotiations and accountability built into the normal process. In conclusion, the hosts posit that the ousting of the House Speaker might compel the government to return to the legal form of managing spending, proposing and negotiating 12 bills annually, which in their view would render government spending more accountable and effective in managing the national debt. The discussion shifts to a critical analysis of the fiscal condition of the United States. They note that the situation risks becoming increasingly dire due to spending and rising interest rates. The hosts call for a well-laid-out strategic plan to reduce the budgetary impact, emphasizing the current lack of such a strategy within American Congress. The hosts then intensely discuss the internal debates within the Republican Party. They note that there is a major ongoing discourse within the party on the handling of spending and foreign policy strategies, especially regarding Ukraine. In fact, they suggest that the objections toward Kevin McCarthy stemmed from a perception that he did not genuinely represent a majority of the Republican caucus and was not being straightforward with his views compared to his actions. In a critique of the legislative process, the hosts criticize the lack of close study in the continuing resolutions, CRs. Unlike proper bills, which undergo cost-benefit analysis from an independent body, CRs, they argue, are hastily passed without adequate scrutiny, leading to careless spending and a lack of transparency. They suggest that a significant portion of the fiscal crisis the U.S. is facing could be resolved by reverting to 12 separate bills, keeping Congress focused and ensuring effective negotiation. Discussion takes a sharp turn to evaluate the effortless removal of the House Speaker according to current rules. The host described this as a function of desirability of the position, arguing that there is a need for a more resilient, tough leader who is not just interested in preserving the status quo or approval ratings. Such a leader, they contend, would be more effective in implementing necessary reforms. As they wind up, they touch on the rising long-term interest rates, which they explain is due to concerns about the federal government's surmountable debt. Despite imminent risks like inflation, they note the increasing demand from bondholders for higher long-term premiums to offset potential losses. And finally, the conversation veers towards the issue of migrants crossing the southern border, a topic that is attracting a lot of attention and controversy, which they suggest they will explore deeper in the coming discussions. The conversation evolves into a discussion on the border crisis. The hosts critically examine available data on border encounters, taking into account migrants who were encountered but not those who made it through undetected. There's a strong emphasis on the reliability of these statistics, with the hosts acknowledging that the true scope of the issue is likely much larger, burdened by flaws in current data collection methods. Continuing on to the state level, the hosts scrutinize Texas Governor Abbott's statements that New York City, with its abundance of services and sanctuary city status, serves as a significant draw for migrants. Subsequently, the conditions in New York City are examined. The city wrestles with its obligations to provide shelter for the influx, leading to considerable storage and financial ramifications. The hosts make it clear that such a politicized issue has both local and national implications. The hosts then delve into detailed observations on the border, elaborating on various points of entry and painting a picture of a border seemingly overrun with migrants. Stories of encounters and close observations, testimonials from visible figures like Elon Musk, are used to underline the severity of the situation. Dissecting the roles of various stakeholders, they highlight the significance of the DHS Secretary's recent report on the immediate need for physical barriers. This admission leads to a debate on whether the Trump administration was justified in its push for a border wall. A stark contrast is made between the administrative officials' current and previous stances, emphasizing a significant shift in the discourse. The media, mainstream or otherwise, is identified as playing a vital role in shaping public opinion. In evaluating ways to manage the border more effectively, smart towers are proposed as a proactive solution. Eyes on the border strategy would involve using surveillance towers for monitoring, identifying hotspot zones, and then building walls where necessary. While agreeing with the merits of this proposition, the hosts also re-emphasize the importance of a strong border wall in defensible regions. Finally, points-based immigration policy is proposed by the hosts as an effective mechanism to manage the border crisis. They argue that the system should balance merit, the necessity for asylum, and orderly processing of individuals applying for migration. The conversation takes a dramatic turn as the hosts explore the recent accident involving a cruise Robo-Taxi in San Francisco. There's a stark critical examination of the media presentation of this incident as the first automated cruise vehicle to get in an accident, which the hosts deem inaccurate. Rather, they detail the occurrence as a hit-and-run incident in which a woman was struck by a human driver who subsequently fled the scene. The woman was tragically launched under the cruise vehicle. The host discussed the response of the cruise vehicle, which, according to the company Cruise, braked aggressively but ended up stopping with its rear tire on the woman's leg. The police requested Cruise to lock the vehicle in place over the woman's leg until emergency responders arrived. They stressed that their protocol during such incidents is often to avoid moving the injured person until professional medical aid is available so as not to worsen any injuries. The conversation then shifts towards the cruise vehicle's role in this incident. The hosts engage in a detailed exploration of the need for the vehicle to remain in place over the woman's leg, diving into medical responses and their potential consequences. They weigh in on the complications that could arise if the vehicle were to move before medical professionals arrived, such as worsening injuries or causing further harm. The narrative is then taken a step further with personal tales from one host's time as a paramedic, providing an essential context for understanding the medical procedures involved in such incidents. These anecdotes give the listeners a vivid picture of real-life emergency situations, explaining the sometimes counterintuitive decisions made at the scene. The hosts offer insightful commentary on the media portrayal of this incident, illustrating the disconnect between headlines and the true nuances of the situation. They provide a critical analysis of the circumstances and iterate that immediate conclusions can often oversimplify complex occurrences. The hosts stress the importance of understanding these nuances to avoid misleading narratives. The hosts offer a deep dive into an unfortunate event, highlighting the complexity and critical thinking required at such moments, presenting a balance of hard facts, comprehensive analysis, and personal experience. This conversation provides an incisive exploration of safety, technology, and the role of media in reporting these incidents. In this segment of the All In podcast, the hosts and guests extend their discussion on the incident involving the cruise Robotaxi into a broader exploration of public sentiment towards technology and technological progression. The discussion pivots into the realm of risk tolerance and perceptions around new technology, with technology's rate of accident being juxtaposed against human-caused accidents. The host provides a hard-hitting statistic. For every 100 million miles driven in the U.S., there's about 1.5 deaths, leading to around 45,000 deaths per year from auto accidents. Fueling discussions around the rate of technological progression versus human apprehension, Friedberg shares a poignant story about the halting of gene therapy clinical trials in 1999 due to one patient's death caused by alleged doctor malpractice. He suggests that the innovation halt led to even more lives lost by not allowing for medical progression. This feeds into his broader point that advances in technology can have substantial societal benefits that outweigh the risks, benefits that are often clouded by public fear, individual anecdotes, and lack of perspective. The hosts discuss the implications of advancements in autonomous driving, gene therapy, and nuclear technology, arguing that there should be a willingness to accept certain risks to achieve progress. The dialogue specifically draws attention to the gap between realistic data-driven risks, hypothetical scenarios, and public apprehension, which frequently hampers technological progress. They further argue that many technological advances primarily benefit the less affluent, who are most affected by price fluctuations, while the more affluent are often the ones resisting change. They criticize this dynamic as unjust, potentially hindering the diffusion of beneficial new technologies in progress. The hosts express a shared hope that society will begin to prioritize progression and understand the necessity of some degree of risk to advance. The hosts and guests focus on the topic of advancements in autonomous vehicles with a strikingly interesting discussion about self-driving cars, autonomous taxis, and the future of road transportation. The group questions the potential of Cruise, the self-driving car unit backed by General Motors. As Kamath points out, the key issue for Cruise and similar companies is the acquisition of sufficient data to make their systems reliable. All emphasize that, in contrast to GM, which has to bankroll its autonomous unit, Tesla's approach to self-driving technology is an inference problem, relying on data provided by its current fleet to refine its autonomous features. In their comparison, they highlight Tesla's wider data acquisition advantages over Cruise. Jason contends that Tesla's existing database of driving data, resulting from millions of their vehicles already on the road, places Tesla significantly ahead of its competition in the self-driving arena, explaining that Tesla, unlike GM, has been strategically installing cameras in all their cars to collect data for years and making it a hard leader to contest. Friedberg agrees, adding that Tesla's consumer adoption and data inputs guide the ongoing improvement of their self-driving tech, allowing the company to fine-tune it progressively. Moving on to the theme of machine learning, Chamath comments on the magnitude of the learning problem. While simple tasks like identifying traffic lights are relatively easy for AI, when you compound these tasks by the number of intersections and lights in every city, the challenge involves turning this into a huge learning problem. They agree that limited implementation of this technology, restricting it to certain locales or regions, would be achievable for companies like Cruise and Waymo. For true autonomy to work, however, where humans and AI can coexist on the roads, the panel overwhelmingly leans towards Tesla once again due to its massive training data. The discussion then makes a segue into the impact of topography and weather conditions on autonomous vehicles. Tesla's approach of covering the entire spectrum, from regular roads to dirt tracks, puts it ahead of Waymo and Cruise, who continue to work on perfecting a set of restrained areas where conditions such as snow and ice may still pose a challenge for autonomous vehicles. In the next segment, the conversation veers towards the fascinating world of JSX, Jet Suite X, a public charter flight company offering customers private jet experience at the cost of a first-class ticket. The conversational journey continues as the panel moves towards JSX, or Jet Suite X, a public charter flight company. The hosts express admiration for JSX's business model, which is based on lower costs and an enhanced flying experience, offering passengers the luxuries of private jet travel at nearly the cost of a first-class commercial ticket. Here they diverge into the waters of airline regulations, differentiating between Part 121 and Part 135. Part 121 applies to standard commercial airlines, while Part 135 caters to smaller charter operations, the main difference being the minimum flight hours mandated for pilots. Commercial pilots flying under Part 121 are required to have around 1,500 flight hours, whereas charter pilots under Part 135 only need approximately 250 hours. As pointed out by Chamath, JSX's operating model borders the thin line between Part 121 and 135 regulations. While it's deemed a charter service, the nature of its large-scale operations closely resembles that of a commercial airline. He suggests that while JSX currently leverages a regulatory loophole to operate as a Part 135 charter, its massive operations warrant attention and might lead to stricter scrutiny and revisions regulation-wise in the future. Defending JSX's mandate, the host also shed light on the company's high pilot flight hour criteria. JSX's captains average over 8,000 flight hours, which is more than 5 times the required minimum under Part 121. Their first officers also average over 3,000 hours, further emphasizing their safety commitment. In delving further into the regulatory dynamics, Jason suggests JSX could voluntarily increase its minimum flight hour criteria even under Part 135 and maintain its operational advantage while adhering to safety norms. This leads to a shared conclusion that while services like JSX are innovative and provide value to consumers, they should operate on a fair playing field without exploiting regulatory loopholes. The conversation concludes as the hosts reflect on another insightful segment, keeping the door open for more dynamic and engaging discussions in future episodes. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.